Hello and welcome back to the Comic Literate podcast, the podcast that does deep dives into the best of comic books, graphic novels, mangas, and penny dreadfuls. I'm your host, the soon-to-be-known as Comic Stan, and with me, as always, is my luminous co-host, is Jamie.
Luminous, I like it.
I mean, luminous in the sense that we all reflect light, but maybe it's like a compliment to be like, you reflect more light than other people.
Well, I absorb light and then shunt it out later. Does that mean if you lick me, you will die of radiation poisoning?
I don't think that's, it's one of those, like, all elephants are grey, but not all grey things are elephants. I don't think everything that's luminous is necessarily radioactive. I also don't know enough about radioactive stuff to know if everything that's radioactive is luminous.
But Ryan, you've read so many comic books that have so much accurate science about radioactive material in them.
Yeah, obviously I know that if you get
you know
radioactive
how gamma
spider,
particles work.
Gamma rays, they're particles, it works more like a light, I assume. I know radioactive spiders are great, and if you see one, get it in you as soon as possible.
Get it in you. Get about it, sunshine.
What happens if you eat it? Maybe you turn into a spider.
A radioactive frog.
I mean...
Frogs eat spiders.
Yeah.
Frogs eat spiders.
What's interesting about the Spider-Man, like lore of the enemies and stuff, is some of them, the ones are animals. A scorpion especially was like, well, scorpions hunt spiders, so we'll make that as one. But they never thought, like, frog's actually really good at capturing spiders. Let's get Frogman on the case.
Frogman would be dope.
Well, there's a Toad in the X-Men. I don't know if...
Oh, yeah, there is, isn't there?
But power-wise, I think he was like a budget Spider-Man. Like, he could stick to walls and he had the tongue instead of the web. But he got beat up a lot, whereas Spider-Man's like a hero. So, probably not the same kind of level.
There's a lot of Marvel chat on DC Day.
It's DC Day, or DC Point of the Month, or whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, it's the... So, before we start talking about this comic, I'm gonna let you into a little secret here. Ryan tricked me.
No, I didn't.
You did.
If I trick you, I revel in it and I announce it and I enjoy it.
You played a small trick on me. You said to me, there's this great comic that you have to read. At no point did you tell me that it was going to be full of superhero shenanigans.
I believe I distinctly said what's great about the comic is that it's a certain genre with a set against the backdrop of the superhero universe.
Those
and that's
were not
what's
your
good.
Words.
I feel like I have that
Fake
pre-rehearsed
news.
enough that I said it.
Fake news. Scandal on the podcast.
It's very possible that I was telling you when you were distracted by something, like an extra luminous person or something.
What we need a list of things that Jamie could have been distracted by at the point at which you gave him this key information.
A person walked in and you were if we were in a public place, a person entered the area and you were taking like a minute to 2 minutes to assess if that was someone you knew or not, because you do know a lot of people, so it's understandable.
It could have been a particularly shiny human being. That's very true.
But then the fear is, and I say this speaking on behalf of the introverts, right?
Yeah.
And I think the extroverts like yourself might be on the other side of this. But if you look at someone hard enough trying to work out if they're someone you recognize, when you're like, do I know that person? Is there not a fear that you are staring at a complete stranger and they're going to look at you and you're going to have to go, sorry, I thought you were someone else.
No, because they just become new friends.
That's the difference between us. Introverts like, I have enough friends already. I do not need to make any more.
You just walk up and say, I'm really sorry, I was staring at you because you look interesting and I don't know you yet. My name's Jamie. Well, go ride bikes.
Speaking of the comic we're about to get into, I do not have as smooth lines to just deliver to complete strangers to make friends. That's why I'm here making a podcast, so I don't have to go out into the world and interact with people.
That's why you conned one of your extrovert friends into making a podcast with you.
Well, there's certainly something to be said for extroverts and introverts kind of like creating a symbiotic relationship in a way. Kind of like, there was an old like Planet Earth thing, might have been an Attenborough thing, but there was a hole, like a burrowed hole in the desert that had a tarantula in it.
Yeah.
But it would also let a frog or something hang about as well. And the frog, there was some symbiotic relationship where the one did so. Are
you saying I'm the frog?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if that works like extrovert and introvert.
I don't know who's let who in is the point.
Well, no, but
it's true symbiosis, isn't it?
The point is that one, they survive off each other's advantages and they work together, and that's kind of what we're doing here on the podcast.
Absolutely,
this is a symbiotic relationship, but not the Marvel kind. That's the important distinction.
Yeah, because if it's the Marvel kind, it's shenanigans.
Well, one of us is wearing the other.
Oh God, Ryan. We're not that
And we're not that. That's what I'm saying. We're not that.
So today we're talking about The Human Target.
Yes, this is a comic that I read a few months ago. It came out last year, I believe, and it blew me away. The first thing to note is that it was written by Tom King, and I am an avid Tom King fan.
Yes.
For those who are not partial to the visual medium of us talking, Jamie rolled his eyes at me mentioning Tom King again. It's not a slight, I don't think, on the quality of the writing,
it's
but
just
how often I mention him.
He comes up nearly as often as Alan Moore, who is, as we've established, the GOAT.
I mean, Tom King's pretty good, though.
I don't think he's goated yet.
For me, this got him to goated level, but I also read Mr. Miracle, which is amazing, and Vision, which is of the series, which is amazing of his as well.
To be clear, this is good.
Yes, and should also note that it was also art by Greg Smallwood,
who we're going to talk about a lot,
intensely. Yes,
I'm excited about Greg Smallwood.
Yes, so general thoughts up top. As I said, you said it was good. Do you want to go into that a little more? Your general enjoyment of the comic or lack thereof?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it had it all, I think, in terms of the things that one could want from a story. There was a good bit of action, and where there was action, it was like fun and meaningful. There was some rich characters with some interesting backstories, which became apparent throughout the story. There was a lot there to enjoy. I have some issues, but we're going to get into those in a bit.
We'll get into the nitty-gritty. I have a proposal for you, which I'm just saying live on the air right now. So you haven't heard this yet. Me. I propose that I think we should go through this issue by issue. I think this is a text. This is a comic book series that is so entrenched in the issue by issue storytelling, specifically because of the actual context of the story. In a similar vein to
I don't like structure.
Well, I'll guide the structure. So of the symbiotic relationship, I will guide us through the structure, and I'll just hold your hand and pull you along like a lost child.
I'm like a boyfriend on holiday where the girlfriend has booked everything and has a full itinerary, and I just turn up with a rucksack and some snacks. Like, where are we going again?
I'm like, we're going to issue 1. And you're like, why do we have to go there first?
Yeah, I want to go to issue 1 first. I want to have my ice cream. Issue 7 was better.
But I think every issue has its own unique thing about it.
My favorite was issue 10.
I said I haven't even got a favorite, but I think I'll discern one once we get into it. But as I said, I'm proposing that, walk through them kind of issue by issue. And I think, because each one also deserves its own little analysis. I think that's the key point.
Okay.
And to be fair, I'm a stickler for structure. I rarely propose this, if anything. So this is my...
Because it always goes horribly.
No, it doesn't. It went fine. It's gone fine in the past. But this is me using my one veto of like, this is one I think we should do.
Do you remember Ice Cream Man? Ice Cream Man was a slog to make and to listen to because of the structure.
Yeah, but that was because it was an anthology, and that was less stringent on the story developing issue to issue. Whereas this, I think, is integral to the story.
It was also back in the halcyon days when we didn't have a fucking scoop what we were doing, in fairness.
That was literally a blind leading the blind. It was the worst of our symbiotic relationship. It's like, I thought you had the eyes. Oh, bollocks.
Oh, no, we both just have feet.
Exactly.
They're all left.
We need a mock-up of drawing of us for the podcast, and it's just us with all left feet. And you only know the reference if you listen to this episode in particular. Otherwise, everyone else is just lost.
And it's going on a t-shirt.
I mean, everything needs to go on a t-shirt if we can help it. So
go on, issue 1.
It's done with issue 1.
Go on.
And this is the little bit of the trick. I would say, based on issue 1, can you give us a brief synopsis of the story only from issue 1?
Fuck off.
Come on.
If I have to do structure, you don't get both. You don't get a brilliant Jamie, not a synopsis, and a structured episode.
I don't know if the synopsis, not a synopsis, was a drawing factor of the podcast, if I'm being perfectly honest.
It's always bad.
Just because it happens doesn't mean it's an integral part.
Okay, for people not watching live, I'm stretching.
So
I'm limbering up.
If I frame it in this question, right?
Yeah, okay.
I
like a framing question.
You are trying to recommend the first issue only to a person. So I'm back in the day. So I'm a human being on planet Earth.
Fuck's sake. Again.
I'm tempted to try the first issue, and I ask you, what's the story in the first issue only?
A man who looks surprisingly like James Bond, only a bit more grey.
I feel like that's most like older, white, like smart-looking men.
Look, right? You get what you're given.
I do see a Pierce Brosnan in him.
There is something a bit Pierce Brosnan-esque, isn't he? He's very handsome.
Yes.
Wakes up to find that he doesn't feel very well, drinks a lot, and then has a conversation with Lex Luthor where it's established that while he was pretending to be Lex Luthor to draw a hit on Lex Luthor, somebody actually did a pretty successful hit on him.
I'd say that's in the closest nutshell, that's pretty much it. The bit I will add from the knowing the character beforehand is the reason he's called the human target is his whole shtick, essentially, is he is a fill-in for people who are expecting an assassination attempt. He's literally the human target drawing the assassination to him so that they can stop it and find out who it was. Or he literally takes the hit, but he survives.
Do you know about the human target?
So I knew of him very briefly. I'd not read a thing with him in it before.
Well, because there isn't much.
Well, exactly. The most I had with him was I watched the CW Green Arrow series, and he was a character on that.
So that was Chris Chance, wasn't it?
Yeah. Christopher Chance, yes.
So there was an original Bronze Age comics human target.
Right.
Completely different character. Turned up in like an issue or two of a run. Tragic backstory, dead, poorly son. And then, so he was like a little used, very, very, very fringe character that somebody decided to resurrect with a new name. That's where the human target comes from.
And this is classic Tom King, taking a character, and not even just Tom King, this is the pattern I keep banging on about. You get a really good writer in who's like, I like this character who I read as a kid for like 2 issues. I want to do a whole story about him. And Marvel and DC happens on both sides. They go, we don't care about this character, so you can literally do whatever.
Go make some money.
If you will write a bit of Batman for us because you're an acclaimed writer, we'll let you do whatever you want with Human Target. Like that's the trade-off. And it just that done again. Again, the original thing for me for that was Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. Literally no one cared about Hawkeye.
This, haven't we?
But yes, he, in the process of being the human target for Lex Luthor, he survives the assassination attempt where someone shoots him, and he's obviously wearing bulletproof vest or whatever. And then he drunk some bad coffee earlier in the issue, and then he's like, when he finds out he's been poisoned, he's like, that was the bad coffee. I think what especially helps the setup of this, the poison was obviously meant to kill him instantly.
Yeah.
But the gunshot that he took and the bulletproof vest made him throw up, and that delayed him. So the main thing that starts in this first issue is the fact that he has 12 days left to live. And I inferred from some of the text that it would be a lot sooner if it wasn't for the fact that the Justice League had amazing medicine. There was like, we can give you 12 days. Yeah. If you drink this medicine, you'll get a little further.
But he elects to drink a different medicine quite often.
Yes, he substituted for alcohol.
He's shit-faced on whiskey for most of it.
Yes, and that seems to help as well in his own way.
It's like Tyrion Lannister. I'll tell you my tragic story. I was drunk for most of it.
Yeah, and I think that is what I love so much about this whole story is it is a quintessential noir detective story set against the backdrop of the DC universe.
Yeah, which kind of, it's the Batman shtick, isn't it?
Well, I think it's even more detective noir than Batman. I think Batman has shades of it. This feels like a homage almost. Like I'd say even just full on. I say this is a detective noir homage for your fancy French lingo. And what I love especially about it is it transfers some of those tropes of the detective noir into this using the superpowers and everything. So you've got like the days left to live because it was a poison. There's one part about referring to the poison as out-of-date oxygen and hydrogen, which I was like, that's bollocks. That's science fiction bollocks. But I have a theory that actually comes... Well, not even necessarily a theory. I might have just missed something on my first read-through. I think that is a pivotal plot point later in it.
Yeah.
But so... Starting at the beginning again, or with the first couple of issues, shall we say?
You've already jumped ahead. You wanted the structure, and
I've been around you too long. That's the problem.
No, don't
reeling us both back in.
Don't blame me. You did it.
It's symbiosis by osmosis. More sciencey terms.
That means nothing.
I tell you what, we can start off with, which is always good to talk about when it's great, and I think it's great here, is the art. Initially,
yes,
art is so eye-catching. The colors are so vibrant and contrasting, and it's always interesting.
I don't know that I think the colors are vibrant. I think they're kind of muted. They have a soft tone thing going on.
Right.
So lots of soft pastel tones, which are really beautiful. And then there's a thing happening where they're allowing those really lovely tones to bleed out of the outlines, to the extent that sometimes you get a browning of the outlines where these soft pastel tones are bleeding out over them. Very, very arty, arty, really beautiful. I think that, I mean, again, going back to the thing that I hate in bad comic book art, there's a great consistency to all the characters. And so you look at them from every angle and in every pose, and they are identifiably themselves. Which you wouldn't think would be something to celebrate in comic book art, but clearly it is.
Yes.
Everything just looks great. The art is doing a lot of the work here.
I think the thing that you hate is, I think that is a result of the house styles of the different publishers, and this sticks out so well.
Doesn't look like a DC comic.
Not at all, no. What I noticed on my second read through that I did for this is that the art, when I was really trying to examine it, some of the art looks like crayon. So some of the shading is literally a darker version of it. Just you see the lines where it's shaded. And then other parts, specifically people or objects in the kind of foreground, have a cut-out effect around it. So it looks to me, what that made me think of was in like these detective stories, when someone leaves a note, it's either in crayon or it's cut out letters from a magazine.
Yeah.
I thought that was the vibe it was going through with the art, which I thought, again, on the second read, I was like, I didn't even notice that, but that added to the vibe, even if you don't notice.
There's a really nice use of texture. Like, there's a really great use of texture, isn't there?
The fact that some stuff is like kind of hard and more detailed, and other stuff is like the background, especially, is softer and more blurred in. And it tells you, like, the background is the vibe, this is the story.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
It separates those things. So yeah, a huge credit to the artist for hand in hand the story just working so well together.
The art was my favorite thing about it, and it took me longer to read than it probably should have done, because I did spend some time just kind of and often in a comic book where there is a big panel with little text and I have to zoom in, and I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, I've got to zoom in now. And the native readers on the sites that you buy these things from aren't great, and so you often find yourself like it skips around and loses your place as you do that, and you have to scroll back to it, and it's really annoying. But I didn't mind so much with this, because then when I zoomed back out and I'd read the blocks of text, I went, oh, that's lovely. I really enjoyed the art for what it was. I thought the cover art was particularly good. The
cover art, I looked into it and I saw it was a bunch of different artists per one.
You can tell,
but everyone nailed it. Like, and this is what I was saying about the issues. Normally when you get running series, cover art's just like, oh, this one's cool, this one's cool, this one's cool. This one was like, cover art immediately tells you what the issue is going to be like.
Yeah.
And again, this is why I was saying about separating them issues. Like, the cover art alone, I was considering buying this as a full hardback or like a full like volume.
Yeah, me too.
But then also I thought, would I prefer to have all 12 issues and have all those cover arts as well?
Do you know what? When I was doing a little bit of research just on the Justice League International and Human Target, and then some of the Green Lantern stuff that I didn't know about as well. Like, I didn't have a clue Gnaut was.
Yeah, neither did I, to be fair.
And so when I was doing a little bit of research, background research and all these things, a lot of the thumbnails for the YouTube videos I was watching were people holding up the individual issues, and I kind of went, oh, I wish I'd not bought a digital copy of this and had bought...
I might still buy a physical. Like, that's my barometer now, is like, I can't buy everything physical because I just genuinely don't have the space. I'm about to have more space, and that's still not enough. But
this was pretty enough to justify it, wasn't it?
And my barometer now is, if I read something so good, then for me it's like, I need to buy this physically. I need to make space for it. If all civilization collapses, I want this physical thing that I can still hold on to and know that I've got it forever, as long as this stays safe. Yeah.
Memory of a simpler time.
Exactly. Back when we had a podcast.
Now we just scavenge for meat.
Yeah, and just talk to each other about comics from before. Do you remember that one Alan Moore story? It's like, that's all we talk about now. We can't remember anyone else.
As we're walking through the ruins of England, trying to find a boat to France in the hope that they wouldn't attacked by the Scourge.
Basically, it might be 28 Days Later, might be Children of Men, one of those kind of British apocalypses, which is a bit more dreary than everyone else's apocalypses. Accurately,
well, there's no
say.
sunshine.
That's the first thing to go.
The sky is the same colour as the fading concrete.
Yeah, we barely had the sunshine before. Now it's completely gone. Also, my note of the art was great facial expressions. I feel like if you took all the dialogue out, you would still like get something out of looking at each character's facial expressions.
In fairness, Chance had but two.
Yes, but I think that was integral to the story.
Yeah.
He as a character, he is extremely stoic to a fault, and I think the fact that he has such limited facial expressions is what it works with the character. It's not like they've drawn this character the same way every time. I think that was a choice.
Yeah. Oh no, 100%. Like I found no fault with the art to the extent that there was a moment that I really want to talk about, but now that we're doing it issue by issue, I don't know that I'll remember which issue it's in.
Well, show me, and I'll make a mental note of it, and we'll come back to it. Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there in a minute. And you sent me that while you were reading it, so I'll remember based on that
because I liked it that much.
Yeah. My first note. With a text like this, I'll make more like nitpicky notes at the start, and then as I get on, I was like, I've just got to make broad general notes. And I think that's good as well, because then I've got less notes about the actual like ending and stuff, which is good. But right at the top, and I don't know if this was like initial creation of this version of the character, but the fact that his surname is Chance, so I was like, is that so on the nose for comic book level, or is that not at all?
Well, it's very Marvel, Chris Chance.
Well, and DC, because what I always think of in terms of names is there's two big ones from either side. One is Doc Ock, like what are the odds? And Victor Freeze.
Yeah.
It's like, you spell it Freis or whatever, but come on. Like what are the odds that he would happen to get into cryology or whatever it's called and freezing stuff. Yeah.
Cryogenics?
Yes. Yeah, that sounds right. But yeah, I thought Chance was like, it's on any other fiction, I'd be like, what are the odds of that?
Yeah.
But by comic standards, I'm like, that's a normal name. That's
and
Smith
again,
here.
This isn't a name that Tom King chose when he created the comic book. Like, this isn't the first iteration of the Chris Chance character. And so he kind of had to use the name, didn't he? Like, he couldn't.
And he never draws to it. So that kind of tells you, it's like, it's the character's name. I'm not doing anything with it.
This is just where we're at.
Yeah, exactly.
I hear that.
So very first from the start, the extremely detective noir trope is starting from the end. So showing the end first. That, I don't know enough detective noir to like make specific examples, but that does feel like a common trope of the genre. I don't know how many detective noirs you've read or seen, or if you know any more about it or not.
Oh, yeah, I mean, a bit, and it often, I mean, it did a thing that you get in noir, which I don't like in comic books, and it was an undercurrent theme throughout the whole thing, which is his narration.
Yeah.
And I sometimes feel like his narration often annoyed me, because sometimes it was being used to move the story along. But then at the start of every issue, you got 3 pages of recap.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like, I know that you're expecting people to read this monthly. And I know that I'm not your target audience, somebody who's reading it for a podcast and just burning through it all in a day. But also, I fucking know you drank some poison.
Yeah.
I know how many fucking days ago it was. You need to stop telling me.
Yeah. And I get that.
It really sucked me out of the story. And I think this is often my complaint with comic books, is that Tom King came up with an incredible premise, but there was just these little things that kept pulling me out of this great story that he didn't need to do. I didn't need a recap. I didn't need a last time on Human Target. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you.
They also did the second cardinal sin of DC Comics.
Oh, the blank swearing.
They did a lot of swears, but they didn't do any swears. Again, swear words are magic. Swear words are deeply powerful. I use them incredibly frequently. I do not like it when they're bleeped out.
Yeah. I completely am on your side with that. It just bothers me less.
And again, I feel like this story would have been more powerful had I not had that string of bleeps, or if I'd had some more concise swearing. There was a lot of swearing and all of it bleeped out, and I kind of just went, ugh, this again.
I'm on your side for that, and what specifically? there were parts later on when the tensions get a bit higher where
not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, but there's strings of swears, and I'm almost like, if they weren't blanked, I think that would look ridiculous.
In the last issue, or the penultimate issue, where Ice is really having a go at him, and she is just swearing 4 or 5 times in a sentence.
Yeah.
When more of the text is strings of ats and hash signs than actual language, that is bothersome to read. Because in your head, all you're doing is filling in the swear words, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the thing is, if you're implying them that succinctly, because you know it's an American dialect, and we've talked about this before, whereas, you know, with our reliance on fuck in Britain, any one of those swear words could have been fuck.
Yeah.
But because you know it's an American voice saying these things, you know which swears they're putting in there, either put them in or just use another tool for her to express her anger.
Yeah, yeah.
We have one. I mean, I don't want to get too, you know, highfalutin about it, but we have one of the richest languages with one of the deepest lexical pools. She is portrayed as an articulate woman. There are a million ways that she could have expressed her anger that didn't require her to swear. Now, having her swear is quite powerful in that moment, but not when you're doing it in a medium where you're not allowed to have somebody swear.
Yeah.
It just bothers me. I just think it's lazy writing.
I wouldn't personally go as far as lazy, but I would say more constricted or needlessly restricted.
But this is the thing. I understand the need for that constraint to be there, right? This is marketed towards younger people. So find more inventive ways for your characters to express their anger. They don't need to swear.
Yeah, I'll retract based on what you've just said. I'll retract what I just said.
I've not been swearing through this entire tirade as proof that one can express frustration without the need to swear.
Yeah.
It's very clear right now that I'm annoyed. I don't need to fuck shit and wank all over it.
Not every DC character went to a university for literature degree, though, so...
No, but I imagine a lot of the people writing them did.
Yeah.
And therein lies the point.
I think I'm about to make you slightly more angry.
Go for it.
In that I read... So this is part of the DC Black Label, and... I read another thing from DC Black Label titled called Rogues, which was a really fun...
Don't tell me they had actual swears.
They had actual swears in it, yeah.
Then what's the fucking point?
I know, yeah. I had the exact same thought when I read that one, and I didn't even notice that there was swearing because it just flowed so well. And then I went, hang on, there's swearing. I had to go back to the cover and go, yeah, DC Black Label, 17 plus. And I was like, what the fuck? So, yeah, no, exactly. And it's a criticism for the publisher. And again, I think Tom King, I'm a big Tom King fan. I generally think he's one of the best doing it right now. I think it's a big criticism, as you say. If you are in that situation that you can't use swears, or if you use them, they have to be censored out, then yeah, don't use as many. I think you are totally correct in that.
Yeah, and it took me out of it so much. And it made some of the characters less believable. And it made these really powerful moments that should have really made me feel something feel trivialized.
Yeah.
To me. And you know, that, I mean, I understand what you're saying about it not necessarily being a complaint specific to this title.
It was still a choice.
But we're talking about this title, right?
Yes.
Like, I can't...
And it was still a choice. No one made him use the swears in the dialogue, censored or not. So I see what you mean by that point. I think for me, like we've said before, I'm more used to it, so it doesn't hit me as bad.
It's the boiling water that you're sat in as opposed to the pot I'm jumping in, isn't it?
But I completely agree with you as well. And the perk of this whole podcast is if you are a usual comic book reader, and you, like me, you're used to it, now you get to hear the person going, hang on, that's not good.
Shenanigans!
Exactly. Speaking of the specific issues as well, one thing I wanted to point out that I really liked is in issue 1, they do the snapshots of the days when you go from the end back to the beginning.
Yes.
And I loved that on my second read through because I know what those snapshots are.
See, I've only read it once.
Exactly.
And I didn't get that sense.
But did it at least create some kind of like, ooh, this is interesting. Like these odd snapshots of the days.
I was super knackered last night when I went to sit down to read this. I'd just done a really long walk.
For any I don't know if they have knackered in America. I genuinely don't know, but if they don't, knackered is tired, not us weirdly saying naked.
I may have also been knackered.
Knackered and knackered.
And I intended to read 1 issue and read 5.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, no, it's good. Like it was paced really well. Should we get some of the like standard comic literate observations about comic books out of the way before we delve into specific issues?
Yes, sure.
Panel layout, really good.
I thought it was good. I thought it was very unique to each scene. But it was like bespoke to each scene and issue.
But it also used so much straight vertical thirds, which I love because it scans so beautifully. It's so easily readable. Like I know why they do those little inset panels, and it's to give you a sense of a conversation happening.
Yeah.
But one of the things they made really great use of here is to have a full shot essentially, a full illustration of both people. And they would say something back and forth to each other, and the conversation went down and across that single panel. And to be honest with you, I don't know why anybody does anything different.
Yeah.
It looked so good. It scanned so well. It was so readable, Ryan. It was so readable.
And
like infinitely good.
As an avid Tom King fan, not as many 3x3 panels or pages.
Which is normally his thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but then when I got to one, I was like, there he is.
Yeah,
and I still enjoy them.
I clocked them as well.
Do you know there's some people, like, small tangent, there's some people who really take vitriol, like, against Tom King and his work.
I know, yeah. People really don't like him.
And all I'll say is, if you're one of those people who just dislikes everything he does, fair enough. Like, it's subjective, like, absolutely fair enough. If you're one of the people who thinks he's objectively bad, I kind of feel like him having critically acclaimed runs on several different comics, like, that's enough to be like, you're in the minority. And
I think if anybody came to me with a really spicy opinion on Tom King, my first question would be, you read Human Target? Pretty good. Like, So I all throughout this, and I think a big part of the conversation for me is that there are narrative devices that he used that I do not like.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of points where I kind of went, that story could have sat on the page better. Not in terms of the way it was laid out beautifully, but he could have told that story a bit better. And I think a lot of the people who don't like Tom King and complain about his work often complain about the way he tells a story.
Yeah.
But he does write a good story.
Yeah.
And this is the one thing I will say for it. I didn't necessarily always like the way he chose to tell his story, but that's kind of what we're here for, isn't it?
Yeah. And it sounds like they were more nitpicking criticisms.
Well,
then.
I mean, they're wider criticisms, and I think they're valid criticisms that I have. But overall, like, the story was good. It was a compelling story. He didn't do the thing that a lot of DC and Marvel comic book writers do, which I call the character ex machina.
Yeah.
Where every problem is solved by the introduction of a new character. Oh no, we need the magic MacGuffin. Oh look, Blue Beetle just floated into shot. There was none of that.
Yeah, I think
every time a new superhero was introduced, it's because Chris Chance had dug up a new little bit of the story or made a really, really... It's because Chris Chance had a new revelation about what had happened, or he'd made a quite succinct inference, and he'd then gone and sought that person out. And sometimes it was really challenging for him to get in front of people. And then sometimes him being around those people was super frustrating for him because it took up more time than he wanted it to.
Yeah.
There was no point where I kind of felt like, oh, for fuck's sake, another character has come to save the day. Because the thing is, there was no day to save. And this is the thing about the wider overarching story that I found really fascinating, is that we knew he was going to die. He knew he was going to die. There was no day to save. It was just him wanting to work out who had killed him. He just needed to know. And
I think, if you're still reading and you didn't want spoilers, I don't think this is enough of a spoiler. But I think, because there's so much more. Like, if you've read if you listen to this and you hadn't read it and you were going to read it, like, go out of your way to read it right now.
Oh, yeah.
But one thing that's important as well is the way the story gets across that he dies at the beginning. What's good, what other weaker stories would have done is they would have then backtracked the death later on. And I think it's great that they didn't do that here. Should we?
And his death scene was like kind of powerful, but also really anticlimactic, quite touching. And then what Ice did with his ashes afterwards, super touching. And it it verged on being saccharine sweet, and then something happened that made it really cool all at the end. Like, yeah, I know you want to take this one issue by issue, but I'm just having fun talking about it as a whole.
Yeah, and again,
I think there's something to be said here for taking this as a whole.
I think from this point onwards, as again, like we've given a little bit of the end, but again, if you're planning on reading it, stop here, stop listening to it, go read it, then come back. From here on, anything could come up. So I think we've given a good indication of the quality of this comic and why you should read it and what's good about it, essentially. What's so good about the story as a whole is how the quality is so intertwined with the story, and we have to get into those bits going forward. You've heard it from us. Go read it. Come back. We'll see you in a minute.
Okay.
We're just going to keep going. But yeah, and the anticlimactic death at the end, again, it feeds into that noir homage of like nothing's fixed. It's like the big one is Chinatown, isn't it? That kind of like it's inevitable. Like bad things are going to happen. You can't stop them. But at least with this, it does give a little bit of brightness at the end where it's not like, and everything was fine in the end. It just gives you that little bit of like, yeah, things are bad, but here's a little nice at the end just to kind of make the end a bit sweeter.
Yeah, and it's like the whole way through we're presented with this character who is really stoic in the face of his demise. There is no... I mean, his whole kind of thing, the underpinning arc of his character is that he saw his dad beg for his life and did not want to die that way, which is why he put himself in a position where he died so many times for so many different people. And he lived it until the very end, until he realized why his dad was begging for his life, and it allowed him to just have that one moment of, by the way, I'm really scared.
Yeah.
And that touched me.
Yeah, that reminded me of, if anyone's also played Red Dead Redemption 2, there is a scene like that with the main character, and he's just literally like, he's, again, like Western cowboy, extremely stoic, very manly, and there is a quiet moment where he just says, I'm scared to die. And that hits you so hard. And on another little tangent, what we were saying before about the swearing, I feel like you kind of have fucked up priorities if you think, swears, bad, considering your mortality, like, that's fine.
triple plus win.
Yeah, I feel like those are like, I'd rather my child know swear words than to really have to grapple with they're going to die one day. Like, that feels to me more of like a life-changing, perception-altering.
Also, going back to that Lord of the Rings thing I keep harping on about, imagine if there'd been no swears through the whole comic and he just looked at Ice and said, I'm so fucking scared to die.
See, I think, in a similar vein, I think saving it for Ice's angry rant.
Yeah.
And then a bunch in that when there hadn't been any. I think that would have hit.
Well, that would have been powerful.
Yes.
Again, it's moderation, isn't it?
Yeah.
And do you know what? If it had just been that, I would have forgiven the hash marks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that would have been weird.
Like,
if, we're doing censors, and then we didn't censor for the last issue. But then you could have been like, you could have put on the front, like, look, I know you've been reading it. It's now 18 plus. There's some swears in it. Just be warned. And that could have hit just as hard, potentially. Come back to what I was saying about the superhero universe being the backdrop against this, like, detective noir murder mystery. I think what encapsulates that for me so well, which I really enjoyed, especially noticing on my second read through, the scene when he's in the doctor's getting the news that he's got 12 days left to live.
Yeah.
And the doctor who's giving him the news looks like a golden age B-tier superhero. Just ridiculous. And I think that for me is like the tone of the entire comic.
The thing with it is the way the superheroes are presented is as Silver Age superhero comics. So when you see that single panel of all of the Justice League International, what you're seeing is like an Adam West era 1960s Batman costume. What you're seeing is the original Blue Beetle, not the modern one. You're seeing a bunch of very camp, kitschy superheroes, but you see them infrequently. And what I love about the superhero shenanigans in this is that Chance is observing them as you are. So there's the issue that he spends with Blue Beetle. There's the issue that they spend with Blue Beetle, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah.
And he watches Ice and Blue Beetle operate, and the whole issue is just like, he should be really fed up and pissed off because he's wasting one of his 12 days just kind of going about and watching Blue Beetle do his day job. But actually, his observation is just watching them operate and just watching the level that they operate on and watching them fight and watching them collaborate together and do this amazing thing. Like, it kind of...
He's a spectator to amazing stuff. Like, even in this universe, people don't see... It's like seeing, like emergency services. Like, how often do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. And often in superhero comics where they have the character Ex Machina, where there's just superheroes everywhere and they're popping in and popping out and using their powers to fix every single problem, it kind of trivializes it. But what you see is him going, wow, she's so powerful.
And this whole thing is almost a kind of, not so much parody, but like an examination of the superhero genre.
Yes.
If you are just, because there's a constant theme of people being like, oh, you're a superhero though, aren't you? Because he's kind of a part of the world, but not really. And even he's like, am I? Like, he doesn't feel like it.
Well, I mean, it kind of flirts with the idea of him being enhanced in some way when it talks about his training.
Yeah.
And the way that he can, like, get into people's psyche and see the secret that they're holding.
Yeah. And his thing being it's not the mask that fools people, it's the lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a little bit of him being kind of enhanced. But really, you know, the fact that the only person that scares him is another non-enhanced person shows you the extent to which he isn't super.
Yeah, exactly. There's the line I mentioned earlier about the out-of-date hydrogen oxygen.
Yes.
Again, reading that initially, I was like, that's bollocks science. Like, particles don't go out of date.
Yeah.
But when you realize that the water used to disguise the poison is literally from another time.
Yeah.
So when he says out of date, does that, and it doesn't do it explicitly, but then does that mean literally out of time? Is that
well, that's what I got from it. And I liked that double entendre. I liked that these particles have gone off. They've left them out a bit too long. Yeah, but what they actually meant is they're like 1,000 years old.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that's like Tom King little like nice touches.
But they didn't. And again, this is the thing that this did really well, that often superhero-y stuff does really badly, is that it really rams an explanation down your throat. Gamma rays work exactly this way, and if I go to the top of a building and I cover myself in certain chemicals and get struck by lightning, I will become the Flash.
Yes.
Dumb. Just saying there's some particles from 1,000 years ago, and for a reason that we all understand, but we're not going to tell the reader, they were the perfect vessel to hide a poison. I'm like, yeah, cool. Yeah,
this is the system. This is the world. This is how it works. Don't ask anymore.
You can only annoy me by introducing too much bollocks. Like, the moment you over-explain something, you've over-explained it. And if you give me something, it needs to be good. If you hold something back from me and just let me fill the gaps in, I'm naturally going to smooth that over and just be able to suspend my disbelief. And this did a gorgeous job of it.
I think there's something to be said for when a story is good enough that it excuses what could be interpreted as gaps in the story or gaps in the science or whatever.
Yeah, but there wasn't a gap in the science because they didn't give me any science to have a gap in. It was just this thing has done this thing, and I went, all right.
But like the gap you could infer is like, why is water from another time hide poison? Doesn't matter. Because the story's so good that it doesn't need investing in. And I think to your point, if people are over-explaining stuff, it's because they maybe feel insecure that the story will carry it by itself. So like, oh no, we have to explain everything. I think science fiction in general has a bit of not a fault, but like a weakness there that like magic-based things don't. Because when you say magic, you just go, right, it's magic, it's fine.
You know what Asimov said though?
Science is just magic we don't understand yet.
No.
Oh.
Any technology that is sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic.
I mean, I basically said that, but I'll take your point.
But Asimov said it better.
I mean,
because he was Isaac Asimov.
I summed it up. I abbreviated it quite well.
You read
Asimov?
Are you familiar with Asimov?
I'm familiar with him. I haven't read any of his work, but...
Dude, Foundations. So good.
But like magic, you just be like, it's magic, and people just write off like, fine. But science fiction has that like, well, we know a little bit of science, but they don't focus on the fiction part. It's like, it just sounds sciencey. Like it's not magic within this world.
Yeah,
it's still
absolutely.
Essentially magic. I'm definitely made like points of like lines that I really liked.
Yeah,
and I feel like that was an overindulgence a little bit, but you know, I like in the diagnosis scene and the guy's immediately like, we should call Batman. Like anytime anything's too difficult for anyone, it's like, we should call Batman. And Christopher Chance goes, don't call Batman, my death, my mystery.
Yeah.
And that's like such a little poignant line. It sums up everything. It sounds cool. Anytime you go, don't call Batman, like I'll handle it, just automatically elevates whoever says it.
Again, I was really charmed by the end when Batman hadn't turned up. Batman and Superman had not turned up. I was like, yes. He didn't go there. Like, there were so many points where he could have gone there, and there was a point where he made you think he was going to go there.
Yeah.
And he didn't, and that was super cool.
Yeah. That whole issue, to skip it a little bit, that whole issue was possibly one of the best Batman stories I've ever read, Batman issues I've ever read, because it didn't have him in.
What, number 11?
Yes. And not, number 10, I think, or 9. It was like, right,
because 10 was the one that had Gnaut in it.
All right, 10, 11 and 12 are kind of two-part ender, so I think it's issue 9, because then at the end of issue 9, he goes, well, Batman didn't come after me, that must mean Guy's still alive. And then 10, they go to the lantern place, don't they?
Yes,
yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Which, again, cracking issue. Yeah. Like one of my favourites.
Exactly. And again, that Batman issue is so good because it's like the, what's it, like Waiting for Godard kind of thing?
Yeah.
Where it's like the character who's only talked about and never introduced, you find out so much about this character. And the fact that Christopher Chance is so scared of him, and he's like, I've made this thing that no one else would figure out is fake except for Batman. And he explicitly says as well, which I love about his character, he goes, I'm really good at what I do, but there is someone who is better than me. And when they figure out, we are fucked. Like, this was a break in case of emergency, get away.
And that's the only reason I knew it was Batman that he was scared of, not Superman.
And he leaves it till way at near the
right
end of
at the end of the issue when they're already safe.
But you know it's Batman.
Well, yeah, and this is it. And he never says Batman, but you know he's running from Batman. And like they get to the point where she builds him the ice house, and you know how the cold has been like a protective factor for him, and it's been like his source of comfort for the entire run. And she builds him an entire like fortress of cold, essentially.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, Batman's not coming.
And he is operating as if someone who's capable of anything is after him.
Yeah, because he says, you know, he goes into really exacting detail. And again, these are the moments where I loved his narration. Are the moments where everything gets a little bit frenetic. And actually, often I find it really annoying when the narration slows down action. But when he does it, it's quite concise. It is the
action.
Yeah, well, his narration... Yeah, I think you're right. His narration becomes the action.
Because otherwise, it's just them driving through the desert and he looks a bit squirrely.
Yeah, absolutely.
The narration is like, he's literally running through like, if he does this, then I can do this. If he does this, then I have to do this. Oh, he's going to do this. And...
But also, I've thought of the 12 things he could do, which means there's 1,000 more that he knows about that I don't. But there's that moment where he says, the one thing you don't do when you think you're being followed is look back. And then the next panel, he's looking over his shoulder and you're like, oh, that's so good. Like, I just get a sense that you're not using your training because you're scared, and you showed me that instead of telling it to me. Really great.
Imagine,
really great.
for a comic with so much narration, it's one of the best show don't tells I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And even within the narration, people think show don't tell literally means actions versus words.
Yeah.
But showing through narration is like he's telling you things and you infer what the comic is trying to tell you. Yeah. Like exactly that. I would love to see someone who doesn't know Batman, which is like, you know, when they do, like Trump going on trial. It's like, we have to find jurors who don't know who Donald Trump is. Like, what?
We're going to go look under some rocks.
Yeah. Imagine finding someone who doesn't know anything about Batman and then you give them this issue. And you're like, what do you think of this character? Like, it elevates Batman so high without him literally doing anything. It's just purely his reputation. The bit where he punches the guy, or gets punched and punches the guy in the diner, I don't know if you'd get the reference, but Batman, or Bruce Wayne, has another alter ego, and it's a disguise he uses to be like kind of like in criminal elements.
Oh,
and it's an alias called Matches Malone. And there's a bit where this is like, if you pick up, he's looking at this guy and he goes, no match. Because he matches Malone, he always has a match in his mouth. He goes, no match, but I think but he might know that I know that.
That makes sense now. I did think, I thought they were trying to get across a sense of his delirium. I thought they were trying to get across a sense that he wasn't operating at full capacity. I didn't realize that was a deep cut. That's even better now that I know that. That's really cool.
I think that's one of those things that it rewards you if you know the universe, but it doesn't hinder it if you don't. And the best thing of the Batman issue, like, for me, was his not being present in the issue that's all about him essentially actually furthers the story.
Yeah.
Because by him not showing up, that tells Chance that must mean Guy's still alive, because otherwise, if he believed he was dead, he would be after me trying to get us. And that, like, a non-action being a pivotal whole issue story, then furthering it after that, I thought was... Because then, if that hadn't happened, it would have feel like, oh, they had to do a Batman issue without Batman, like a novelty, but the end kind of justifies
it makes
this
sense.
Is why it happened. So that whole issue, one of my favorites.
I mean, at the start of the issue, I felt like it was a big change of tone because this very stoic character who's been approaching the problem of his own death with quite a lot of stoicism and quite a measured approach is suddenly shitting himself. But then you get to the end of it and it all makes sense and it's quite justified.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
Like, it definitely made sense, didn't it?
And speaking of the use of characters, the use of Ice as a character, like in her introduction alone...
This is issue 2, isn't it?
Yes. That, for me, was, again, one of the tropiest noir tropes, is the beautiful woman waiting in the office.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
there's some women you just don't say no to.
Exactly. And that felt very, like, on-the-nose homage, but how often do you see that in superhero comics? Like, again, like you said, Batman earlier. Batman always, it kind of flirts with the noir elements. Yeah. But this was like, if you took out the superheroes, it's just a noir story.
Yeah.
But what I love especially is in noir detective mystery, murder mysteries, whatever, there's always this thing about the femme fatale and the fact that the detective immediately in his inner monologue, he's like, she's dangerous, she'll get you killed, she'll eat you alive, like that kind of thing. So it's like, by getting close to this woman, you are putting yourself in danger, but she's so, not even just attractive, but like so alluring and tempting that you throw caution to the wind.
At what point did you realize it was her?
No, probably not till the end. I read it in a way where I wasn't like, who did it? Yeah. I was more kind of like, what's happening?
But it was a whodunit.
It was a whodunit, absolutely. But it was such a rich story. It was such rich characters that I were normally whodunits. When the whodunit is the main thing, is because it hasn't got much else, or the characters might be like fun or a little interesting, but the who does the main thing. Yeah. For me, I was like, how is Chance, what is he going to do next? Like, how is he reconciling with all this?
100%, I totally bought it all. But it was the point at which he started being suspicious of fire. And Ice was very protective all of a sudden, and I'd not really seen that kind of aggression from her. I was like...
See, I just took that at the face value, because that's how well it's written, that she was the best friend, and she was just, like, couldn't imagine anything happening. Because also the twist could have also been it was fire, and that could have been like, oh, it was her, but it wasn't, and then it was. And that's kind of what it did with Ice. Like, everyone is a suspect until they're not, but then they could be again, as is what happened. And for, like, Guy especially as well, because he was a patsy at one point as well for that. But
Guy's a fucking cock.
Yeah.
Is it because he's not a particularly well used Green Lantern these days, is he?
No, not anymore. Just before we go off Ice, I was going to say what I liked was how, again, the trope of the woman who's dangerous to be around is literally dangerous to be around because of her power. And that, for me, was the best use, using superhero shenanigans to do a modern version of an old trope.
Take out the paternal relationship between Wolverine and Rogue, I think her name was.
Yeah, he does. He has paternal relationship with a lot of younger X-Men, but she's one of them, yeah.
Yeah. But take away the paternal relationship and the idea that, like, her touch could kill him. It's kind of that same vibe, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Like, power that's dangerous to be near.
And using superpowers for character traits is it's at its best, I think, when it does this kind of stuff.
I think there's something... I mean, I kind of feel like the idea of an uncontained power is something that you see more often with women in superhero stuff.
Yeah.
So generally, I mean, other than Cyclops, who without his glasses, his thing will just like everywhere. Yeah. There's more female superheroes whose powers are dangerous to be around or uncontained in some way. And I feel like there's some less than positive subtext going on there. Yeah,
I think that's definitely a stereotypical, the hysterical woman, isn't it? That is a trope that unfortunately it still gets used even if people aren't realizing they're doing it.
Her womb is wandering and so her ice powers are dangerous to be around, right?
Yeah.
And so there was some element to that. I kind of thought, oh, that could have been dealt with better. But then she wasn't just there to drive the story along. She was a very fully fledged character.
Yeah.
She didn't pass the Bechdel test.
No, this story doesn't, but it's because it has a male main character who is the extreme focus. So I get what you mean.
Yeah, but why pass the Bechdel test?
Yeah, but why wasn't always on Yorick? This is always on Chance, isn't it?
Yeah. But you see my point?
Yeah, it doesn't pass the Bechdel test, but I think there's a reason for that. Whereas something like why is
never a good reason for it.
Well, I think, but then it's like why does Shawshank Redemption not pass the Bechdel test? Because it's set in a men's prison. Like there are situations. The Bechdel test isn't if it's good if it passes and bad if it doesn't. It's if you do have like a more ensemble characters, or characters just talking with each other, and there's not one singular person in every scene, a main character, then you should have women having normal conversations that don't revolve around the male characters. But there are examples and situations where that's not the case, and I think this is one of them.
Possibly, yeah. I don't know.
But what you say about the hysterical women and their powers, or that portrayal, I think in this at least, she does have some like, hey, just to warn you, like there's parts where I can't control it, but she's not out of control at any point.
She has control, and I think there's a fun juxtaposition between the way that the warmth that he gets from her cult is juxtaposed really nicely to the quite hedonistic sexual gratification that John gets from Fire's powers.
Well, what's interesting about that is me knowing this stuff, the super shenanigans.
Isn't his race scared of fire?
Exactly, yes. So that it's like a mirror to what Chance is doing with Ice. It's literally the same thing. He's literally getting someone who is dangerous for him to be around, but he can't help it. And John especially is like stoic to a fault as well.
Well, the difference is he cries afterwards.
Yes. And
hopefully you won't cry this time.
There is a bit of a running joke, I think, in comics where Martian Manhunter kind of gets shit on sometimes. Like, he's famously like, people refer to him like, oh, he's as powerful as Superman or Wonder Woman because of his powers. But then bit of fire and he's done. Like, there's been injustice.
Well, no, a bit of fire and he's a gooey mess on the corner of the bed. A lot of fire and he's done.
Yeah. Well, depending on whatever the written is, because there's been injustice where it's like, ooh, Martian Manhunter, he can take down this now evil Superman. And Superman just laser eyes him. And he's like, right, you're gone. And then there's a part in like an animated movie where it's like the Justice League coming together and Batman discovers John Johns, I think his name is, as a Martian, and he literally says, like, I've discovered two aliens on this planet. One of them, to defeat, I would need to purchase an extremely rare and expensive mineral that's hard to find. For you, I just need a box of matches. And that's like, they're always like subtly shitting on Martian Manhunter for some reason. But yeah, you were about to touch on Guy Gardner, who I think is a big plot point within this. He's well written to be hated.
Yeah, no, they did a great job with him. He's just a cock.
That whole baby, I'm trying to protect
my
you.
Girl,
like, that's
my girl.
Yeah, stay away from my girl. And the girl's like, I'm not yours. Like, that's like such a annoying like characteristic that's so well done.
Just like that sense of possession over women, and like they use the inherent sexism as that in that to make him a point of ridicule. And so there's a power in that. But yeah, it does. It's like an idea of heterosexual relationships that I feel like needs to go fuck itself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for this being based so much off that Justice League International run, which I think was from like the 90s maybe, or even maybe older.
Well, yeah. So do you know much about it?
No, I didn't know before I read this.
I knew nothing about it. And it was in my research, I did a bit of research on the Martian Manhunter, did a bit of research on Guy, and did a bit of research on
Human Target.
Yeah. Gee, I keep wanting to call him the Manhunter. I don't know why. And yeah, no, the JLI stuff just kind of passed me by. So I was really hoping you would have some context for me.
Well, all I know is, as I said, it was a team from before, and like the Avengers has different iterations. Like this is. Even Justice League, like this is Justice League Dark. They do dark magic stuff. There's always those kind of things. But for me, it felt like this one was really based on that snapshot of that particular run.
Yeah.
And one of the key points that Tom King draws from that is in that run, there is a part where Guy Gardner is kicking off against everyone. and Batman's like, if you don't shut up, I'm gonna punch you, or something like that.
Right.
And Guy's like, you couldn't do anything even if I didn't have my ring. In fact, I'll take it off. And he passes on like, here, hold my ring while I like even the playing field.
And then he gets murked.
Gets knocked out, yeah. And that panel basically buried the character for years after.
Right.
The one bit I have read a Good Guy Gardner story, or the story that he was in, and it was one of the from a not too recent ago, a Supergirl run where she became a Red Lantern, and Guy Gardner was a Red Lantern. And the whole point of that was Red Lanterns were meant to be fueled by anger, but Guy was the kind of mentor for Supergirl to be like, anger itself is inherently bad. Like the Red Lanterns have been bad because they were led by a guy called Atrocitus.
So they both became Green Lanterns or Red Lanterns?
No, Red Lanterns.
Right, okay.
So the point was the red ring finds someone in a moment of anger because that's the vibe. And
imagine Supergirl with a red ring.
yeah, that's I think I read that around the time that we read them. Yeah,
unlimited power.
I mean, it helps, but the whole point is it's channeling your anger, and it's not necessarily a bad thing if you channel it in the right way. And Guy Gardner becomes like a bit of a mentor to Supergirl for that. So he was good in that. He's been an asshole in everything else I've read him in.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that shot of him getting punched by Batman, I think Tom King was like, I'm going to do that several times in this somehow.
Well, again, it's interesting because so much of what Guy does is really brilliant. No, what Chance does.
Yeah.
But then at the end, you find out that Ice has been guiding his hand the entire time.
Well, I think only up till the point where she needed him to take the rap. So that happens a bit later when Chance gets to Martian Manhunter and then fire. And she says as soon as he got to fire in his investigation, she was like, shit, we need to do something. And that's when she goes to Guy like, yeah, Guy, I need you to help me out with this. And Guy's just an idiot, so he just goes along with anything.
Yeah, anything for my girl.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything for my girl, innit?
I love how they used the Green Lantern ring in this.
Yeah.
The lore of the ring being used in this. Like, Christopher Chance just knows all about the superhero shenanigans, and he's very similar to Batman. He's got plans in place for all this kind of stuff. But for Guy especially, it's because he chatted to one of the cooler Green Lanterns in John Stewart, and he was a Marine, so they had this war. He didn't talk to. He talked to John Stewart and Hal during not the original, but like the Silver Age, most well known one. He's like the leader of the Earth area lanterns, and you see the guy be like, I'm sorry, Hal, like I didn't mean like he basically Chris called Dad and was like, I'll call your dad over and he'll sort you out.
But then but Dad doesn't actually come. He pretends to be Dad, and that's dope because very rare that he actually uses his abilities and his skills in this. And so that one moment where he does, you're like, yeah, that was dope. That was pretty fucking cool, man.
And there's a big thing with like Green Lantern stuff whenever they interact with like people like Chance or like Batman who are just very knowledgeable about the stuff. There's a bit in like an animated Justice League thing where Batman literally steals the ring off of Hal's hand. Yeah. And Hal's like, how'd you do that? And he's looking at it, like, no buttons or anything. I assume it must work off concentration, which it does. Yeah. And he's like, how did you steal off my hand? He goes, well, you weren't concentrating.
Yeah, well, and Chance does the same thing.
Yeah.
When he thinks he's killed Guy, he punches him, not to actually hurt him, but to break his concentration for long enough that Ice can do her thing. Really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And again, just a great use of super shenanigans in this story.
So, Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern?
Yeah.
Which one is he?
He was Hal Jordan.
So he was Hal. He was the cool one.
He was the cool fighter pilot who becomes a Green Lantern. Yeah. I think one thing that I noticed as a superhero fan, and this is just a tiny tangent, but DC, and comic listeners I think will agree to this, DC does a thing where people just randomly get powers, whereas Marvel don't do that with a lot of their characters, but they have the X-Men, which is that entirely.
Yeah.
So DC has like and then they discovered they were metahuman and they had powers. Whereas Marvel is like, that doesn't just randomly happen unless you've got the X gene and then it does happen.
Yeah, which is one and the same to me. I don't really see a distinction there, if I'm being honest with
That's
you.
what I'm talking to my fellow basement-dwelling comic book nerds. Like, we know what's up.
The unwashed.
Yes, we know what's happening. Yeah. And again, with the little the lines that I liked.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, what, like in your notes, which issue were we up to at the moment?
I don't mark about it. I just make them as I go. So we're just generally kind of going in a chronological order, but we're jumping around as well. I think we're meeting halfway on this structure thing. The bit where he's tempted to go back in the hotel room with Ice.
Yeah.
And he says, I've got 11 days left. And then he just looks at her and he goes, who needs 11 days?
Well, he keeps saying, don't get out of the car, don't go up. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, I've done it. And then he's like, I've stayed in the car. And he's like, but let me walk you to your door.
Yeah.
And he's like angry himself, like, you idiot.
And then he's like, don't go in. And then she kind of cracks the door a little bit and he go, their whole relationship's really sweet.
Yeah, one of the best relationships I've seen in comics.
It really, like, it gave me the feels for the times in my life where I've been swept up in a new relationship like that. Like when
you were dying from a poison and you had 12 days to live.
Yeah, that time.
Yeah.
That time, before I got the secret serum.
Yeah. Chance was an idiot. He didn't think of that.
Yeah, he didn't. It's a comic book. He could have gotten a secret serum.
Yeah, of course.
He just needed to go and ask the right dude. If it had gone to Batman.
Yeah, can you put me in the Lazarus pit? Do you find one of those?
Yeah, Batman would have just been like, my guy, I've got a thing. You're a pretty good detective. You'll be useful at some point. Here you go.
It's his rigid stoicism. It's like, I will not ask Batman for help to solve the murder. No, to save my life. Like, not even that.
I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I want to see a run where Chance has, like, money. I want to see a run where he's got Batman's gear. Imagine him with Batman's kit, but just in a suit. Like in a nice suit, just cutting about.
It'd be amazing. The unfortunate thing is the reason this is so good. Part of the reason is because the character's dead and gone.
Yeah,
that he might, if he comes back, it's not this character.
No, like, it's not going to be anywhere near this good.
No, even if it's the same name and everything. And this is the problem I had early on reading things like Tom King's runs. I'd be like, oh, I love this character now. Then I read another version. I go, oh, it was the writing that and that was kind of one of the earliest, like, this is how important good comic book writing is. Because it makes you think, oh, I love this character now.
It's part of the reason that we do this once a week.
Exactly, yes. I made a note of a line which I thought I don't know if you would have noticed or not. And it is kind of played tongue in cheek. But when he goes to the Lantern planet and they're talking about, like, knowing all the things going on between Lantern communications, and he literally calls it cosmic wiretaps. I was like, I wonder if Jamie's gonna like kick off for that. But it was said in like a layman's term. Like, it wasn't like, this is the cosmic treadmill. It was like,
there was also an undercurrent sense that he was taking the piss out of Gnort a little bit.
Yeah, I think.
Do you know what I mean?
He was trying. Yeah, he was trying to be. The difference, I think, was he was generally trying to be nice to Gnort's face.
Well, he liked Gnort.
Yeah,
like, he likes Gnort. He just, and this is the thing, he liked Ted. Like, he spoke really highly of Ted, and he kind of said at one point, you know, Ted's just a really great guy who just wants to do the right thing. But I think Chris Chance's power as a character, and the thing that he was trained for, is being able to observe when somebody's useful.
Yeah,
and making use of them for the end that you have of them. One of the things that makes him really great at his job is that these people who everyone else outwardly takes the piss out of, he doesn't. And so when he approaches them, and, like, you know, Ted had no reason to help him, but when he approached him, he was like, hey, man.
Yeah, glad to help. I'm busy, but I will try if you want to come with me.
And then he spent a day with him, and he didn't quite get what he wanted, so he's propped him up at the bar at the end of the night and went, right, last resort, let's get you drunk.
And a little line when he's getting in his suit, he's going through the conveyor belt. Yeah. And that one line of, like, something that I didn't note down for some reason, but it was something along the lines of, like, you kind of have to believe that I've got nothing to hide, or I can't hide anything. And
then he's naked
in front of him. Yeah, it's a little fun bit of context.
So I've met Ted twice now. Both times, total dude.
Yeah. He's like a fun Batman. Yeah. Which is why he's good friends with Booster Gold, who is one of the funnest characters you could hang around with.
Booster's Bagels, man.
Booster's Bagels, so funny. The running joke about pre-toasted, completely unnecessary, which makes it so much fun.
And he's like, the bread kept making people sick. I even tried pre-toasting, but it didn't work.
And everyone's like, that's not a thing.
Well, no, not in Booster's Bagels, it's not.
And just, that's an example of great writers just seemingly, like, between different writers, capturing the essence of characters.
Yeah, 100%.
I've said this to you off air about one of my favorite characters in Marvel is Mr. Sinister from the X-Men. And everyone just seems to nail that. And it's not an easy, simple character. He's a bit of a goof, but he's got the heart under it, and he's very funny. You sent me
that one fantastic panel the other day, didn't you?
But also, Booster, he always has the back and forth with his little robot, who I can't remember the name of, and there's going to be some super nerds screaming at me right now for that. But they always have the great back. It's like the straight man and funny man from, like, a comedy duo. The most straight man is literally a logical, clinical robot who is just correcting him at every turn.
Also looks a bit silly.
Yeah, it's just like a funny little
Because again,
thing.
the supers here all look super camp because they're like Silver Age design. There's a very Silver Age design aesthetic that runs through all the supers, isn't there?
Yeah.
Except for Ice, who just looks fucking swish.
Well, you do see her
entire time.
I think she gets costumed up when she's teaming with Blue Beetle. And towards the end, when she's doing Justice League stuff, and Martian Manhunter's like, oh, actually, and all that bollocks. But yeah, I think the color scheme and everything, it has that 60s vibe. But because you point out, because it's kind of more muted colors, it's not in your face, but it feels part of everything.
It looks fantastic.
There's so many lines, like I said about noting lines, like a lot of them that I noted down I literally was just kind of in awe of like how smooth they made chants. Yeah,
super like smooth as butter. And then there's this great moment that I sent you a screenshot of when I was reading it, where Guy says, "This isn't your fight. You're not one of us. Go back to dying."
Yeah.
And the text starts to fade because he's just knocked him out. And so that is that's Chance fading out as he's speaking to him. And I'm like, oh my God, you made a gradation of color across a text box tell story. That's cool. That's like, I've never seen that before. It's such a great idea.
It should be used more for how often characters get knocked out in these kind of things.
Right? Yeah. It made perfect sense. Instead of there just being dots, instead of just using a couple of ellipses, they actually, you watch him fade out, but you don't watch him fade out. You watch his perspective fade out hourly.
Yeah.
That's really clever.
Yeah. The specific lines that I found so smooth is like he's talking when he's walking Ice to the door, and there's the sexual tension is there, and he says something like, "Oh, you like people don't surprise me" or something, and she's like, "Oh, I guess I didn't surprise you," and he says, "Not at all. I had high expectations, and you met them," and that sounds like an interviewer review. But it's just like such a high praise in a very stoic way, like just matter of factly, like I think you're awesome.
I aspire in my life to at least once look that good in a suit and be that smooth when I talk in it. Do you know what I mean? Like it is smooth, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I was literally looking at it, I was like, how can I be that smooth?
It's like as smooth as an expensive cigar, mate. Like
I think the only way to do it is to literally hire Tom King just to be a piece in your ear. And even then, I think you need to give him time. Like he might not be able to come off the cuff.
He's a comic book nerd. Of course, he's not that smooth.
Well, comic book writer, that might be a different breed.
I feel like to be a comic book writer, you have to be the uber nerd,
like Alan Moore.
Alan Moore's not a nerd.
I mean, have you seen early photos of him?
Oh, he looks fucking weird.
Yeah,
but he never a nerd, always a wizard.
I think he became a wizard.
Always a wizard.
I don't think you're born a wizard.
Right, I'm gonna you make your next point, and I'm gonna look up a picture of young Alan Moore because we need to settle this because this is slander of the highest order.
Well, the point I was going to make, and I think you might want to weigh in on this. This might be, dare I say, one of the sexiest comics I've ever read. Slowly building tension between these just amazing looking, like ridiculously attractive characters, and it builds the tension in a way, and then it transfers so subtly from sexual tension to emotional tenderness. And it goes into that, and it dips in and out of that. You like seamlessly
super sexy.
Jumps in between it. Yeah,
super sexy,
sexy, comfy. Like it jumps in and out.
But this is the thing, right? Like that sexual tension and that sexiness kind of stops being sexy when it's transactional. I think what makes it so powerful and so sexy is that they slip out of that into something more tender, but then back into it again the next morning when they get up and they're just going about their business.
Yeah.
And you're like, you two are both, not to get too punny here, cold as ice. Like they are ice cold.
Yeah.
By the way, I've found a photograph.
An old photo of Alan Moore?
Yeah, where he couldn't look less nerdy.
Right.
That is a man who is stomping on the far right. For reference, guys, it's Alan Moore with very long brown hair and beard, with his hands in the pockets of a very tight pair of vintage Levi's, and he's got a red vest on with the hammer and sickle on it.
Yeah, I saw someone was doing a jokey fan casting of comic book writers, because that would never happen. It's just a dumb thing. But the one they picked for Alan Moore, like one of his early days, like that era, Christian Bale.
Oh, a long head. Yeah, no, yeah.
He'd nail it, yeah. Show Don't Tell that we were talking about earlier.
For Brian K. Vaughan.
Someone bald.
Jason Statham. All right, I'm fucking Brian K. Vaughan, sunshine. Up the old apples and pears, assassinate somebody, you know?
I'm fucking writing Saga, one of the most amazing space operas you've ever fucking seen. It's really fucking heartfelt and emotional, you know?
I need you to fucking electrocute my heart so I can keep going.
So I could keep writing these really deep characters. I think this is the dumbest joke we've ever... the dumbest tangent we've ever gone on.
It's an insult to both Brian K. Vaughan and Jason Statham.
But they're both far more successful than us, so
it
why,
doesn't
why
matter.
should they
We're
care?
only punching up.
Exactly. And the fact that they're so far above us is fine, especially Jason Statham. He just fought a bloody shark. Like,
oh, yeah, he did, didn't he?
A giant shark. Twice, I think. I assume. I haven't seen them, but I assume he wins at the second one.
But he was in Snatch, so, you know, he's golden.
Snatch and Lock, Stock, obviously. Like
he wasn't in Lock, Stock.
Yeah, he was. He wasn't the main character, but he is in Lock, Stock.
No, is he?
Yeah, of course he is. He's one of the four main boys.
Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry.
It was one of his first acting roles because he was like a model before then or something.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this on the podcast. There's a great music video for like an EDM track from the 90s. And there's like a skyscape. And in the sky is Jason Statham like pumping his crotch dancing in a mankini. Fucking fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, he looks amazing.
Well, yeah,
ridiculous, but amazing.
Cut. He's always been cut, hasn't he? Like,
yeah, of course. Back to the comic. As I feel like that might be a running phrase of the podcast now.
Back to the comic.
The show Don't Tell. I really enjoyed them getting closer on Blue Beetle's ship. It's all just panels as them just slowly getting closer, and it's not a rarely used trope, but I thought it was well done, especially for a comic medium.
But again, so relatable. The idea of like, you know, you're a teenager, you're at a house party, and you end up getting sat quite close to somebody you fancy. And for reference, Blue Beetle says, oh, there's one seat in the back. It's small, but I think you'll both fit. And then the way they show it is progressive panels through the whole issue. Like, whole bits of action happen, and then every time they cut to them back in the spaceship, one of their hands is just a little bit closer.
Yeah.
And it ends with just a third panel right in the middle of the page of her hand like on his inner thigh.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's just so good, isn't it?
Yeah, and
it's
again,
so
building tension. There's other stuff going on. Blue Beetle's still talking.
Yeah.
And this always happens when like a third person is talking to the other two people. Like,
And what you see is a Chance that's really good at interrogating people who doesn't get what he wants out of Ted until the end of the day when she goes to bed and he gets him drunk. And it almost feels like him getting him drunk because he says, oh, I need a drink. Do you want to get a drink, Ted? And you're like, yeah, you've been drinking the whole time. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But then you realize, well, he's been drinking this whole time and he's been operating at quite a high level. Ted's quite straight cut.
Yeah.
Ted gets blackout drunk and that's when he gets the intel out of him.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe...
And just by asking.
Yeah, and maybe if Ice hadn't been there in that ship and he'd had more time to talk to him, he would have done it more subtly. But it's like, he was like, fuck, it's been all day.
That's when a great text of any kind, it gives you that room for a bit of headcanon. When you read or watch anything and it requires headcanon to make sense, that's bad. But when you've got things like this where there's gaps where you think, ooh, this is a little interesting thing in my head that adds to this, but it doesn't require it at all. I think that's a mark of a great text. I think that's inevitable when you just read a good story because they're not going to put every little tiny detail in there. So you just infer some things, whether the writer intended it or not.
I want more of the characters.
Yeah, I just want to read more Tom King. Like, this is the level where he operates at for me, and most of the time. There was a Batman run that kind of petered out, and he had to stop it, and someone took over, and stuff he set up. Basically, Batman married Catwoman, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, this is great."
We talked about this.
Yes, yeah. One last point that I kind of want to get into, we were saying about how great the Batman issue was.
Yeah.
I would rank alongside that the Martian Manhunter issue.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it brings some weird, sexy stuff in, and I suppose it's an interesting. It highlights just how sexy the Chance and Ice stuff has been by showing you a sexual relationship that isn't particularly sexy but very kinky.
Yeah.
They're having some kinky sex.
The Martian Manhunter is like stoically trying to resist, and Fire's just like, I've got you wrapped around my finger.
Yeah.
And John's just like, oh god.
But again, a lot of kinky sex is about power dynamics.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And people who engage in that kind of stuff will have explicit conversations about where the power dynamic for the scene that they're going to do together is.
Yeah.
Weird parlance, but that's how they talk about it.
Sure.
And you see that power dynamic being played out in a different way in that relationship from an infinitely more powerful person.
It feels a little more like the a bit more of a toxic version of what Ice and Chance have. And what Ice and Chance have isn't exactly healthy because of the circumstances.
But they make it healthy.
Their attraction for each other and develops into their love for each other elevates it higher, whereas Martian Manhunter and Fire feels a bit more carnal, a bit more animalistic.
Because honestly, when that scene at the end where Ice and Fire were sat on the sofa together, and Fire was kind of trying to console Ice in her grief, but really not doing a very good job because she was just concerned with the practical consideration of, is anybody going to know that we did this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I kind of went, fuck you. Like, she loves him. And I got a little bit angry because I was like, no, you're not. You're missing the point. She's grieving. And
But you can also understand from a third character's perspective, they did just know each other for just over a week.
Oh, 100%. I fully get why they did that. And again, I didn't hate the character because it was an interaction that didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
I think it did exactly what Tom King wanted it to do.
It
made me feel a way.
A friend with good intentions, but isn't helping.
Yeah, and
the
it's
best
just like,
way.
you don't understand. You weren't there, man.
Yeah.
You didn't see like we saw, right?
And I think there's a trope in like action films and stuff where, a hero and their love interest will develop a romance over a short time because of high octane situations.
Yeah.
And I think this especially, you've got all this subtext of, she might have killed me, Ice knowing that she essentially killed him, that they're just getting close to each other for information, and it's the whole deception almost
all of the
in a way.
subterfuge.
Yes, and that heightened tension is what creates this dynamic where they not only become attracted to each other but also fall for each other. It's a scenario unlike any other where love has developed in a quicker time because of all this other emotion and tension.
Because secretly it's what all men want.
All men want to just be frozen to death mid-sex.
That glorious moment.
I mean, we're saying that in the middle of a British summer, so that's that's where we're
I want to be
from.
frozen to death during any activity, mate.
But when I was going to the Martian Manhunter issue, I love the whole brain, like the psychic battle that's going on over the passing the salt action.
Yes,
which is directly explicitly said when the woman who trained Chance in this psychic warfare was I could do this over you passing the salt. Like, that's how quickly this all happens. And I do love. There's a lot of stuff in superhero stuff because there's a lot of psychic powers when it comes to superheroes. There's normally these like very vague terms of like psychic defenses and things like that. A character will be like, oh, this one psychic character gave me psychic defenses or some other term. And it's like there's like physical walls in his mind or something.
The Doctor Strange approach.
Yes. And done like X-Men do a lot with Xavier and Jean Grey and stuff like that. But here, it wasn't just I've trained you in defenses. It literally explains how the defenses work, and you rarely see that in this kind of stuff.
It kind of explains how it works, but again, it does the thing that I really liked from earlier, where it doesn't really. It shows you how she taught him. It doesn't actually tell you how it works.
Well, it for me, I felt it explained it in the layman's terms. So it's like, think of it like this, and then it just like cosmic wiretaps. It's just like,
so we saw a teaching tool that she used, but it didn't give us a bunch of neurological babble or psychobabble to tell us how it worked. It was like we saw him learn it, and we saw the way that she taught it to him, and so it rooted it in another very grounded relationship that he had. Even though we don't see that relationship with his mentor play out over the page a whole lot, it was still really grounded. Like the idea that she's in Lex Luthor's pocket and he is
I think that was
her.
That was someone else.
Oh, it looked like Luthor to me.
I think I just inferred it was someone else because they didn't explicitly, for me, show Luthor. Okay. It was some other person who had this woman's the keys to her ship, and then that turned into Chance getting them back for her. But I love the analogy of you're holding on to a thought, and they can't get it from you because anyone can psychically hold on to a thought and protect it, but then they start opening your other thoughts and you scramble to protect all these. They pull all these other things that aren't the things you're hiding, but things you're embarrassed by. And instead of, he couldn't develop actually holding on and hiding and like retaining the thoughts. So she's like, well, if you can't do that, take down the walls. They'll rush in thinking thinking you have the resistance. They'll stumble in and then you can get in their mind. And the way it shows there is when you start seeing Martian Manhunter in Chance's memories and you go, oh, he's in there now. Like he didn't mean to be and now he is. And then you see Martian Manhunter's memories. And the way it tells us all, in the layout and the panels, and just a little bit of explanation from the woman that's not to do with what's happening currently.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you some context for what's about to happen.
Yeah.
Does a great job of it, doesn't it?
And then the entire scene is literally, at the end, he passes the salt. And I think, that was just, for me, that was as good as the Batman one.
It was a whole issue of build-up that you could have missed.
Yep.
Like, you could have missed that. That could have, you know what I mean? Like, it was really good.
And again, it results in a piece of information that furthers the investigation. So again, like with the Batman one, it all was necessary for the next stage.
Yes, 100%.
And I feel like we've covered as much of the broader, bigger points, as well as, some of the key character moments and story beats and everything. I think if you have stuck along and listened to all this and have not read it, I think you can still read this and get so much more out of it. Like, there's so much we haven't covered still.
Yeah, I mean, we've barely talked about so much of what happened.
I mean, I think we've inferred it quite a bit, but dialogue especially, like, It always felt, apart from the swearing senses, it always felt realistic, or at the very least felt cool and stylized and fit the tone.
It was really readable.
And that's what you want from reading a comic.
So how many vials of out-of-date hydrogen and oxygen would you give this out of 5?
I mean, 5 out of 5 immediately.
5 out of 5, blowing the top off the scale.
I mean, when we're limiting ourselves to a 5 out of 5 scale, this for me is the top.
How many vials of out-of-date oxygen and hydrogen out of 10 would you give it?
I mean, at least an 8, maybe a 9.
This gets an 8 from me. And one of the things that I like to do is give SMART goals. So, Tom King, if you're listening, for it to have been a 9, you'd have had to have fixed the swearing.
Yep.
For it to have been a 10, you'd have had to have lost the panels, the 3 panels at the start of every issue of Recap, and the times when you gave us huge chunks of story, which is just one panel with a bunch of boxes of expositional narration going down the left-hand side.
That, I was actually going to make a point. I forgot that I liked that because that was only used for flashbacks. So I liked that because it distinguished it from the modern day stuff.
I wasn't a fan.
I enjoyed it.
You know how I feel about that kind of stuff, though. I just feel like it's lazy.
But then, I feel like when you are doing such good stuff with the modern, with the present day story, I think you are allowed to take shortcuts with, well, not allowed. I don't mind personally if you take shortcuts with the flashbacks only. It's the same thing with like television film. There'll be like a sepia tone on the flashback or something, It's like, you can tell this happened before because it looks different. Like, little techniques like that, I'm fine with.
I get that I don't like it.
That's fair.
It's irksome. But again...
The podcast cannot end until we reach a consensus. No, it's fine. We disagree, that's healthy.
It's a very small fly in an otherwise very, very calming pot of salve.
Is it the kind of fly that you could just take out with a spoon and still be fine eating it, or would you ask for a new one?
Well, a salve is like an ointment.
Right.
So you'd take the fly out.
Do you not eat your ointments?
Well, not if I want them to work. I feel like that ruins the efficacy.
I mean, I'm no fancy pants doctor, but
I'm just a simple lad from Texas.
I'm no big city slicker lawyer,
but in the Lone Star State, we eat our guntuum.
I'm no fancy pants superhero doctor who also, for some reason, recommends church. But I mean,
multiple times,
mate. Superman. Like, God's out the window. Like, come on.
Well, God does exist, and he wears a blue and red suit.
Yes, I'm your God now. Yeah, as that's Superman famous voice. I mean, that's Superman in Injustice.
Would be like, I'm your God now.
Yeah. Oh, in Injustice, he gets a little cranky,
grumpy Superman.
Yeah, but that's for another time.
So,
yes,
thank you for listening.
But if you've made it through all the tangents here, thank you for persevering. The tangent is the podcast now, essentially.
Literally, yeah. So if you want to leave us a review, do so on wherever you get your podcasts. If it's a 5-star one, we might read it out. If you want to tell us all of the things that we got wrong, go to comicliterate@gmail.com. Thank you for listening and good night.
Thank you. Goodbye.